Justice is broken. The ones who need it most are the ones it fails first. I'm Detective Obscura, and we're about to follow the trail of a man who didn't wait for the system to act.
Well, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Jason Vukovich. They also call me the Alaskan Avenger in the press. If you see me on here and you see my channel, you get a chance to get to know me and you know what this stuff is all about.
Taking justice into his own hands, determined to protect the innocence of countless young souls. They call him the Alaskan Avenger, a name whispered in fear and fascination. But what turns a victim into an executioner? Let's step into the cold and find out. June 2016, a series of brutal attacks sent shockwaves through Anchorage. The targets? Convicted sex offenders. The perpetrator? A man who would soon be known as the Alaskan Avenger. Our story begins with Jason Vukovich, born in 1975 in Anchorage, Alaska. At the tender age of 4, Vukovich's life turned dark when his mother married Larry Lee Fulton. What should have been a new beginning became a nightmare that would haunt Vukovich for decades. Behind closed doors, Larry Lee Fulton subjected Jason Vukovich and his older brother Joel to years of relentless abuse. The torment began in 1979 when Jason was just 4 years old, after Fulton married their mother and adopted them. For over a decade, until Jason was 16, the brothers endured a nightmare under the guise of religious discipline. Fulton's abuse was multifaceted and severe. Physical beatings were a regular occurrence, with Fulton using wooden planks, belts, and his bare fists to inflict pain. The brutality of these assaults left lasting physical and emotional scars on the young boys. The SA was equally horrific, often taking place during what Fulton called nighttime prayer sessions. These dark, violating encounters left the brothers feeling helpless and trapped in their own home. The psychological toll was immense, as Fulton manipulated religious concepts to justify his actions, further confusing and traumatizing the boys. Jason and Joel, in their desperation, developed a heartbreaking survival strategy. When they heard Fulton's footsteps approaching their room, they would press themselves against the wall of their bunk beds, hoping to create as much distance as possible between themselves and their abuser. In an act of brotherly protection, Joel often volunteered to go first, absorbing the worst of the abuse to shield his younger brother Jason. In 1989, at just 14 years old, Jason saw a flicker of hope, an escape from the nightmare he had endured for years. His abuser, Larry Lee Fulton, was finally charged with second-degree abuse of a minor. But that hope was cruelly short-lived. Instead of facing the full weight of justice, Fulton walked free with a suspended sentence. No jail time, just 3 years of probation. Even more disturbingly, he was allowed to return to the very home where he had inflicted so much pain. No one in the justice system checked on Jason or his brother. No one intervened. They were left to endure 2 more years under the same roof as the man who had already stolen so much from them. But the failure didn't end there. The religious environment that shaped Jason's childhood only deepened the betrayal. His family belonged to an insular Christian church, one that some would later describe as cult-like. Instead of condemning the abuse, the church allegedly justified it, twisting doctrine into a shield for the predator. When charges were filed, it wasn't Jason who received support. It was Fulton. The church stood behind him, offering legal aid to protect the man who had devastated a child's life. This religious backdrop added another layer of complexity to Vukovich's trauma, as it intertwined abuse with spiritual manipulation. In 1991, at the age of 16, Jason and Joel made the desperate decision to run away. With no identification, no money, and no support system, Jason found himself in Washington state, resorting to theft and petty crimes simply to survive. This marked the beginning of a troubled path that would see his criminal record grow across multiple states, including Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, and California. This prolonged trauma created a deep-seated sense of worthlessness and self-hatred in Vukovich, emotions that are common among survivors of severe childhood abuse. For Vukovich, these wounds festered over time, manifesting in behaviors that reflected his inner turmoil. Like many survivors of childhood maltreatment, he struggled with depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, conditions that often drive risky or self-destructive behaviors. His life became a desperate search for meaning as he attempted to reconcile the horrors of his past with his present reality. The trauma Vukovich endured appears to have shaped his perception of violence, driving him to view his subsequent violent actions as acts of heroism. When Vukovich discovered the S-offender registry as an adult, it acted as a catalyst for his unresolved pain. It provided him with a distorted sense of purpose, an opportunity to externalize his trauma and confront those he associated with his abuser. In his mind, targeting convicted S-offenders became a way to protect others from the pain he had endured while simultaneously seeking retribution for the injustices of his own past. His first victim was Charles Albee, a 68-year-old man with a conviction for second-degree SA of a minor. Vukovich broke into Albee's home in the middle of the night and struck him repeatedly in the head with a hammer, leaving him bloodied and injured. Albee later recounted that Vukovich berated him for his past crimes during the assault, calling him out for being listed on the registry. The second attack targeted 25-year-old Andres Barbosa, who had been convicted of possessing C-SAM. Vukovich entered Barbosa's home under false pretenses and assaulted him with similar brutality. Barbosa sustained injuries to his face and head before managing to escape and call for help. The trauma Vukovich endured appears to have fueled his perception of violence as heroism, leading him to attack Wesley Demarest, a 67-year-old man convicted in 2006 of attempted second-degree SA of a minor involving inappropriate conduct with a child. Demarest confessed to the officer who interviewed him. Vukovich broke into Demarest's home late at night and struck him in the head with a hammer while he slept, leaving him with a fractured skull and lasting physical and emotional trauma.
Out of bed, and by the time I got to my door, there was some guy standing there with a hammer. He started yelling at me about offender. It was 2006. I had a conviction. Attempted something or other with my step-granddaughter.
After these assaults, Vukovich fled, but was soon apprehended by police. At the time of his arrest, authorities found the notebook containing details about his victims, cementing the premeditated nature of his actions. During questioning, he justified his attacks as acts of vigilante justice, but later expressed regret for resorting to violence. In his own words, Vukovich saw himself as an avenging angel, a protector of children. This savior complex, born from his traumatic past, allowed him to justify his violent actions as a necessary evil. Society's often conflicted attitude towards vigilantism may have played a role in Vukovich's actions. While we condemn such behavior officially, there's an undeniable fascination with those who take justice into their own hands. This cultural ambivalence might have further reinforced Vukovich's belief in the righteousness of his cause. As we piece together the evidence, a disturbing pattern emerges. Vukovich's attacks were not random acts of violence, but carefully planned operations. He used the S-offender registry as a hit list, methodically targeting his victims. This level of premeditation suggests a man driven by a mission, however misguided. But here's where the case takes an intriguing turn. During his roadside interview following his arrest, Vukovich mentioned Cherie as a handler. However, investigators found no evidence of this person's existence. Instead, they believed this mysterious figure was a product of Vukovich's psychological issues. The creation of Cherie points to the complex mental state Vukovich was in at the time of his crimes. Experts suggest that individuals who have experienced severe trauma, like Vukovich, may sometimes develop dissociative tendencies or even alternate personalities as coping mechanisms. In this case, Cherie could represent a manifestation of Vukovich's fractured psyche, perhaps embodying a part of himself that he believed justified or directed his violent actions. This psychological aspect adds another layer of complexity to Vukovich's case. It underscores the profound impact of his childhood trauma and raises questions about the intersection of mental health, trauma, and criminal behavior.
The effects of a human being when you were raised the way I was raised, that stuff lasts with you your whole life. And there are things that you have to actively work on the daily, and I do. I work on those things on the daily.
While it doesn't excuse his actions, it provides crucial context for understanding the mindset of the man who would become known as the Alaskan Avenger. We're left with more questions than answers as we conclude our investigation. Was Jason Vukovich a vigilante whose pursuit of justice blurred the line between hero and criminal, or a man determined to shield children from the horrors he once endured? The truth lies somewhere in between. What we do know is that Vukovich's controversial actions have forced a necessary reckoning with the failures of the legal system. His case has highlighted significant issues with offender laws and their implementation. The Sex Offender Registration and Notification Act, or SORNA, has been criticized for its broad application and questionable effectiveness. Studies have shown that these registries often contain errors, such as wrong addresses or listings of deceased offenders. Moreover, the law's retroactive application to pre-act offenders has been a subject of legal debate. The ACLU, or the American Civil Liberties Union, has challenged the constitutionality of certain aspects of SORNA, arguing that it imposes excessive restrictions on offenders, even after they have served their time. Critics argue that current offender laws, including registration and civil commitment, are unjustly applied and may not effectively prevent recidivism or increase public safety. These laws can make it extremely difficult for offenders to reintegrate into society, potentially increasing the risk of reoffending. Vukovich's case has also brought attention to the lack of adequate support and treatment for both victims and offenders of SA. Many offenders do not receive proper treatment until after prison, if at all, despite evidence that treatment can reduce recidivism rates. As of March 2025, Vukovich's status has changed significantly. After serving part of his 23-year sentence, he was granted parole in June 2023, with the release set for 2028. However, his journey has been complex. He was briefly released on house arrest for about 4 weeks before being returned to custody due to concerns over his social media activity. In late 2024, he was cleared to rent his own apartment and continue electronic monitoring, suggesting a gradual transition back into society. Vukovich's story continues to spark discussions about justice, rehabilitation, and the effectiveness of current offender laws. While his violent actions cannot be condoned, they have undeniably brought these critical issues to the forefront of public discourse. His ongoing transition from incarceration to parole adds another layer to the debate on rehabilitation and reintegration of offenders into society. Was the Alaskan Avenger a hero, a force of retribution, or a man driven to the brink by a world that turned its back on him? Leave your thoughts below, and stay tuned for more in-depth explorations of crime and justice. And before we close the file on this case, let's remember Jason's message to young victims. If you have already lost your youth, like me due to a child abuser, please do not throw away your present and your future by committing acts of violence. Let his words serve as a reminder that healing is a journey, and your future is still yours to shape. Choose to rise above the pain. In the tale of vigilante justice, the line between protector and predator is razor thin. Stay curious. Stay safe.